Writing a short film is a great way to become a better screenwriter and get noticed. But how complex should the structure of a short film be compared to a feature-length film? Inciting incident, first turning point, midpoint, low point, second turning point, climax, resolution. Can you and should you really include all that in just a few minutes? I'm Pietro Schito from Write Something Great, and to answer that question we'll break down the structure of Paperman, one of my favorite animated short films from Disney Animation Studios. Before we jump in, a quick reminder to subscribe to get notified about more videos on how to become a professional screenwriter. And a big thank you to my patrons Jesús, Marco, Alexis, and to my accent coach Bianca for supporting me to create more videos. Click the link below to join them on Patreon and get exclusive perks. Paperman starts with a short prologue that sets the story in motion. We meet our protagonist, George, a young man waiting for a train. What do you notice about him in this single shot? His facial expression, his costume design. He probably has a boring job. He looks unfulfilled. We've just met him and we already feel for him. Then we get to the inciting incident or catalyst, which is the moment in your story when something erupts into the protagonist's ordinary life. In this meet-cute moment, a gust of wind carries George's sheet of paper onto Meg's face, causing them to smile at each other. But before George can realize it, she's gone. At this point, the story expresses a clear, strong question. Will George and Meg get together? George is back at his ordinary life. He stares at the sheet of paper that has been kissed by Meg. We meet the antagonist, George's boss, who together with the circumstances separates George from what he wants. Here is when we start to perceive George's need. Meg is the representation of a much deeper change that George must make in his life to be fulfilled. But he's not ready to change yet, so he gets a little push from an invisible character that we've already met in the beginning, the wind. Thanks to the wind, George notices that Meg is being interviewed for a job in the building across the street. This is the first turning point. And now the story question becomes more specific. Will George be able to get noticed by Meg? The situation brings an implied ticking clock, as the interview will be over soon. Remember that your protagonist will try the easiest, safest way to stay in his comfort zone. George waves his arm at her, which doesn't work, and which actually causes more trouble with the boss. George decides to send her a piece of paper from his stack. Maybe she will recognize it. Remember, we admire characters for trying more than for their successes. Here we see George trying again and again until he gets to the last sheet of paper, the one that she had kissed. We are now approaching the midpoint of the story, a major change that turns the story in a new direction. Meg is leaving, George's boss is on his back, and pressured by the story, our hero faces a dilemma and decides to risk his job, to step out of his comfort zone, to leave his pathetic life behind and go look for Meg. The world outside our comfort zone is a dangerous place, but it's where growth happens. From the midpoint, we get to the low point. Dejected and frustrated, George tosses the last airplane, which ends up in a dark alley. But when all seems lost, something changes. In a beautiful sequence, the lipstick-marked airplane is moved by a breeze and followed by the others. The mystical force of the wind brings them together in a vortex that finds our hero and pushes him toward love, the reward for his growth. Meg steps off her train at the same station where they met the first time. And the same framing which raised the core question is now giving us the visual answer. The wind that brought them together in the first place has now reunited them. This short film proves that following the classic Aristotelian structure can create a wonderful, simple story. I mentioned 7 core elements that I believe any 3-act structure short film should have. If you'd like to dig deeper and learn more about each of them so that you can apply them to your next short film, click the link in the description to get your free guide. And here's an action step for you. Observe how the 3-act structure works in other short films you love, and even in story-driven commercials. Let me know in the comments what you find out and maybe a link to watch your examples. Thanks for watching. I'm Pietro Schito. Go write something great.